Beneath the rolling gray expanse of the North Pacific, in the silent dark 1,000 feet down, a ghost is remembering a river. It has no map, it carries no image, yet somewhere within its sleek silver-scaled body, a memory is pulling. A memory written not in neurons, but in chemistry, in magnetics, in the very tilt of the earth. This animal, a Chinook salmon weighing over 40 pounds, has not tasted fresh water in 4 years. It has hunted in the open ocean, evaded sharks, outswum seals. It is a supreme predator of the deep, a creature of salt and vastness. But now a switch has been thrown. An ancient, irrevocable clock has reached zero, and it has begun to starve itself to death. This is not an accident. It is not a failure. This is the plan, a perfect, terrifying biological script written over millions of years. Every move it makes now, every turn north, every dive of its powerful heart is in service of a single final purpose: to cease being an ocean ghost and to become a river phantom. To trade the boundless sea for a single narrow stream of cold water rushing down a mountain it has never seen. It will find that stream. It will fight its way to the headwaters. It will spawn, and then it will die, its body dissolving into the very gravel that cradles its eggs. But why? Why would evolution craft a creature so magnificent, so powerful, only to mandate its destruction at the peak of its life? This seems like a catastrophic waste, a tragic flaw in the logic of life itself. But what if it's the opposite? What if this isn't a flaw, but the most elegant, brutal, and ecologically vital strategy on Earth? This is the mystery of the salmon run, a mystery that begins not in a river, but in a featureless blue desert thousands of miles wide. A mystery that asks, how does an animal find a single point on a continent it left as a fingernail-sized infant? And what happens when this ancient, suicidal pilgrimage, a pilgrimage that literally feeds forests, begins to unravel? To understand the end, we must first understand the middle, the lost years. For between the river fry and the returning adult lies a black box of ocean life science is only now beginning to pry open. When a young salmon, now called a smolt, first enters the saltwater estuary, it undergoes a metamorphosis as radical as a caterpillar's. Its body must reverse its entire osmotic biology. In freshwater, it constantly fights to retain salt. In the ocean, it must fight to expel it. Its kidneys rewrite their function. Its gills flip their chemical pumps. This alone is a physiological suicide mission for many. But if it survives, it vanishes. Tagging studies reveal they don't just linger near shore. They embark on epic oceanic migrations. A salmon from Russia might feed off Alaska. A fish from Oregon might swim to the Gulf of Alaska. They become deep-water predators, chasing lanternfish, squid, and krill into the twilight zone. They are shaped by the ocean into muscular torpedoes, their silver sides a perfect camouflage in the open water, reflecting the dim light from above to disappear. For years, they are citizens of the deep, anonymous, growing, storing energy. They are storing energy not for more life in the ocean, but as fuel for a journey they don't yet know they have to make. And here lies the first layer of our mystery, the trigger. What tells a healthy, thriving ocean animal that it's time to turn off the feeding, to begin the long, hungry home swim? It's not hunger, it's not temperature alone. The leading theory points to a combination of internal genetic clock and subtle celestial cues. As the salmon reaches sexual maturity, its endocrine system is flooded with hormones that initiate the next phase of the script. But the direction? The direction comes from a sense we can barely comprehend. They are navigating by the Earth's magnetic field. Think about that. Swimming in total darkness, through storms and currents, with no visual landmarks, these fish possess a built-in, living compass. Research suggests they have magnetite, tiny crystals of iron oxide, in their tissues, likely in their nasal passages. They don't just sense north and south. Evidence implies they create a magnetic map of the Pacific Ocean. They know, in some innate way, that the specific magnetic signature of their home river estuary, the unique angle and intensity of the field lines at that spot on the coast, is a point they must hit. They are swimming toward a feeling of magnetic rightness imprinted upon them as smolts when they left. So the ghost turns. It stops hunting. Its digestive system begins to shut down, converting from a processing unit into a storage unit for the final journey. It is now living on borrowed energy, on fat and muscle it will cannibalize mile by mile, and it points its nose east toward a shoreline it hasn't seen in half a decade. The suicide run has begun. But the ocean is not ready to let it go easily. This is where the gauntlet opens, and the true cost of this strategy starts to become horrifyingly clear. The first leg is a marathon through open ocean, aiming for the continental shelf. Here, the predators are waiting, sleek, intelligent, and themselves following an ancient calendar. Orcapods, particularly the mattle-hunting transients, know the salmon are coming. They intercept the converging lines of fish, their sophisticated echolocation painting a picture of exhaustion and abundance. A salmon, focused on its internal map and conserving energy, is a slower, less evasive target than the wary hunter it was just months before. Every mile south and east is a deduction from its energy budget, paid to the constant vigilance and evasion of teeth in the deep. Then a new sense begins to override the magnetic one. As it approaches the coast, the signature of its home river calls, not through magnetism, but through chemistry. This is the second miracle, and it's even more precise. Each river, each tributary, each watershed has a unique chemical cocktail, a fingerprint of minerals, vegetation decay products, and soil types leached from the specific mountains it drains. This olfactory landscape was imprinted on it as a fry. Now, as an adult, its olfactory bulbs, the parts of its brain dedicated to smell, are enormous, disproportionately large. It is a swimming nose. In experiments, salmon have been blinded and still found their home stream, but block their sense of smell and they become hopelessly lost. They are following a scent trail across hundreds of miles of ocean, a trail diluted to parts per billion, a trail scattered and shifted by currents. It should be impossible. It is like you smelling a single specific pine tree from across a continent. Yet they do it. They zero in, turning with unerring precision at river mouths, choosing the correct fork again and again, ascending a watery labyrinth guided by a memory of taste. But reaching fresh water is not salvation. It is the moment the true punishment really begins, because the animal that enters the river is not the animal that will spawn. It must undergo a second, even more grotesque metamorphosis, and it must do so while fighting a current that wants to erase it in a channel that has become an obstacle course of modern threats its ancestors never knew. The ocean ghost is about to become something else entirely, a river monster, shaped not for hunting, but for a single, final, brutal struggle.
The moment it crosses the salt line, the salmon's world collapses from 3 dimensions to 1. The vast open hunting ground is gone. Now there is only upstream, forward, against. Its first act in fresh water is a final reflexive purge. It expels the last of the ocean from its system. But this is more than a physiological switch. It's a point of no return. The very chemistry that now surrounds it begins to poison it. After years in alkaline seawater, its body, optimized for salt, now floods with fresh water. It is drowning from the inside. To survive this, its gills and kidneys must perform a desperate, energy-sucking reversal of the process it undertook as a smolt. It's a metabolic debt incurred at the worst possible time. And it has stopped eating completely. Its gut is atrophying, sealing shut. From this moment on, every single calorie it burns, every muscle contraction to fight the current, every neural impulse to navigate is drawn from its own flesh. It is an engine that only knows how to consume itself. So why does it look so different? Why does the sleek silver ocean predator now often appear as a hook-jawed, hump-backed, grotesquely colored creature? This is not decay, this is targeted hormonal demolition. The same hormones driving it home are now re-engineering its body for a single final purpose: dominance and reproduction in the river. In males, testosterone triggers a shocking skeletal restructuring. The jawbones elongate and kink, forming a vicious-looking kype, a hooked snout that is less for feeding and more for combat. Its teeth grow longer, sharper. This is not for catching prey, it's for fighting other males, for claiming a patch of gravel. The skull thickens. The skin, once reflective silver, now anchors itself to the bone with collagen, becoming tough, leathery armor. And then the color. The magnificent silver, perfect for disappearing in the open water, is now a liability. In the shallow, clear river, it would be a flashing beacon, so the body dismantles it. Pigments flood the skin, deep reds, greens, purples, violent blacks. These are not random, they are signals, billboards of fitness. A male salmon with the brightest, most dramatic coloration is advertising his strength, his virility, his success in surviving the gauntlet so far. He is a warning to rivals and a beacon to females. But there's a horrifying subtext. Some of this color comes from the breakdown of his own tissues. The brilliant red is, in part, the blush of internal cannibalism. The female undergoes a different, equally taxing transformation. She develops a massive, distended belly full of eggs, up to 30% of her body weight. Her focus isn't combat, but construction. Her body prioritizes delivering those eggs to the perfect gravel bed, intact. Her shape changes less dramatically, but the metabolic toll is the same. She is hauling her future, her entire genetic legacy upstream, while slowly starving. And the river is no longer the pristine highway of its memory. This is where the ancient script meets the modern world, and the gauntlet becomes a slaughterhouse. First, the natural predators, tuned to this pulse of desperate energy. Brown and black bears, having fattened for winter on berries, now line the falls and rapids. They are not hunting for sport, they are harvesting. A skilled bear will often only bite the most energy-rich part, the brain, the skin, the eggs, leaving the rest. Bald eagles crowd the trees, waiting for the weakened, the dying, or the scraps left behind. It's a calculated, efficient nutrient transfer from sea to forest, and the salmon's death is the currency. But the new obstacles have no such ecological logic. Dams, concrete walls that turn flowing highways into still, warm lakes. For a salmon, a reservoir is a death trap. It's directionless. Its warm, stagnant water speeds up fungal infections that now bloom on their battered bodies. It forces them to expend precious energy searching for the outflow, for the current they must follow. Many fish ladders and passage systems are stressful, confusing labyrinths that leave them exhausted and disoriented, easy targets for predators gathered at the base. Then, the hidden killers, the water itself, warmed by climate change and lower snowpacks, holds less oxygen. A salmon's metabolism, already running a fever from exertion and hormonal chaos, requires cold, oxygen-rich water. In water above a certain temperature, their systems simply fail. They suffocate in plain sight. And the water carries new poisons, pesticides from agriculture,
tire dust from roads, pharmaceuticals from cities. These endocrine disruptors can interfere with the very hormonal signals guiding their transformation and navigation, leaving them stuck between life stages, confused, unable to complete their final act. So the creature fighting upstream is a paradox, a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, falling apart at the seams, pushing through a world increasingly designed to stop it. Its body is consuming its brain, its organs, its heart to fuel this last swim. Studies have found their spines literally begin to dissolve to release calcium. They are living skeletons, animated by little more than genetic imperative. Which leads to the most profound, unanswerable question of this entire ordeal. What is it experiencing? Is this a slow-motion agony, a 4-month drowning on land? Or is it something else, a state of transcendent, chemical-driven focus where pain is irrelevant and the pull of the gravel is all that exists? Their deteriorating brains are flooded with opioids and corticosteroids, natural compounds that could numb pain and induce a feverish, single-minded drive. Are they, in their final weeks, in a kind of trance, a biological dream of home written in molecules of suffering? They don't stop for pain. They don't stop for injury. They will slam themselves against concrete walls until their snouts are raw pulp. They will wriggle through shallow riffles, scraping their scaled bodies on rocks just to gain another foot. Every leap up a waterfall is a gamble of life against gravity, a calculation made with a brain being digested for fuel. When they finally reach their natal stream, the exact stretch of gravel, the specific chemical signature they memorized as a fry, they are often mere ghosts of themselves, emaciated, fungus-ridden, spent. But they have arrived. The ocean ghost has completed its impossible navigation. It has become the river phantom. And now, on this small patch of stream bottom, it must perform the final elegant act for which all this horror was merely the prelude. It must, in its dying moments, build a cradle for the next generation. But how does a creature on the brink of physical collapse construct a nursery that will survive the winter floods? And what happens to its body next is not an end, but the real reason this suicidal run is the beating heart of an entire continent.
The gravel bed is not a random choice. It is a specific, perfect engineering site. The female, her body a vessel of dying energy, now becomes an architect. Using the last powerful sweeps of her tail, muscle that once propelled her across ocean basins, she begins to dig. She turns on her side and thrusts downward, displacing stones, scouring out a depression called a red. This is not mere digging, it is a precise calculation. The gravel must be the right size, large enough not to be swept away in winter floods, small enough for her to move. The water must flow through it, delivering oxygen to her eggs, carrying away waste. She is building a life support system for her offspring, who will live here for months after she is gone. As she works, the males battle. Their hooked jaws lock. They slam against each other, tails thrashing in displays of brutal, wasting strength. The victor earns the right to hover next to her, to fertilize the eggs as she lays them. But there is a dark, fascinating twist to this competition. Smaller, often younger males have evolved a sneaker strategy. They don't develop the dramatic hooks or humps. They stay silvery and small, hiding at the edges of the red. At the exact moment the dominant male releases his sperm, these jack salmon will dart in, adding their own genetic material to the mix. It's a desperate alternative path to reproduction, a gamble that bypasses the full suicidal transformation. When the moment comes, it is shockingly anticlimactic. The female, hovering over her excavated red, releases a cloud of vibrant orange eggs. Simultaneously, the males, or male, release their milt,
a milky cloud that envelops them. Fertilization happens in an instant in the open current. For the adults, it is the final biological command. The script has been followed, the clock has run out. And then they simply stop. The drive that defied oceans, scaled waterfalls, and consumed their own bodies evaporates. They drift, listless in the slow water at the edge of the stream. Their fins are tattered, their eyes often clouded with fungus, their skin hanging in loose, discolored patches. They have become ghosts in truth. Within hours or days, the river takes them. Their bodies, empty vessels, settle in the eddies or wash onto the banks. This is where our story should end, a tragic, heroic death, a senseless waste. But look closer at that carcass on the riverbank. This is where the genius of the strategy, the why behind the suicide, is revealed in breathtaking scale. The salmon's body is not waste. It is a meticulously designed nutrient bomb, and its final detonation is what sustains everything around you. A single adult salmon carries within its flesh the concentrated nutrients of the open Pacific Ocean: nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, marine isotopes. These are elements that are scarce in freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems, locked in the deep ocean. The salmon has acted as a biological conveyor belt, a living pump, transporting tons of these essential nutrients hundreds of miles inland. When it dies and its body decomposes, it releases this wealth into the stream and the forest. The process begins immediately. Flies lay eggs on the carcass. Within days, maggots writhe, accelerating the breakdown. Aquatic insects feast. The nutrients enter the water, fueling algae and biofilm, which feed the tiny aquatic invertebrates that will, in turn, feed the salmon fry when they hatch. But the transfer doesn't stop at the water's edge. Scavengers are the key distributors. A bear dragging a carcass into the woods may eat only half, leaving the rest. That rotting flesh fertilizes the soil directly. Studies have traced nitrogen from salmon in the roots, trunks, and needles of trees over 500 meters from the stream. These trees, the pillars of the coastal rainforest, are literally made of salmon. The birds that pick at the carcasses spread it further. Even the worms that pull bits of tissue into the soil are agents of this grand redistribution. This is why coastal forests where salmon run are denser, taller, more productive than those without. The salmon's death feeds the trees that shade the streams, cooling the water for the next generation of eggs. Their death creates the habitat that their children require. It is a perfect reciprocal loop between ocean and forest, mediated by a single animal's sacrifice. But this grand cycle operates on a knife's edge of timing. The fry hatch in the late winter or spring, still carrying a yolk sac, a packed lunch from their mother. They must emerge into a stream that is now rich with insects, fed by their parents' bodies. They're timid, hiding in the gravel, then in the complex woody debris along the banks, debris that falls from the fertilized trees. For a year or two, they grow in this nursery, this world built by the death of their ancestors. And then, one day, triggered by length of day and water temperature, they feel the pull in reverse. They undergo their smolt transformation, turn silver, and let the current take them back to the sea, completing the circle. This is the sublime, almost spiritual logic of the suicide run. The individual dies horribly, but the population, the ecosystem, the very landscape lives because of it. The salmon is not just an animal, it is a fundamental ecological process, a river of death that becomes a river of life. Which makes what is happening now not just a conservation problem, but a form of ecological starvation. As dams block runs, as warming waters kill adults before they spawn, as commercial fishing intercepts them at sea, the nutrient pump is shutting down. Scientists can measure the ghost of runs past in the thinning tree rings, in the less productive soils, in the thinner, weaker fry in streams that once boomed with life. The forests are growing hungry. The entire coastal ecosystem is experiencing a silent famine. This raises a terrifying and fascinating question. What happens to the memory of a landscape when the creature that writes its story disappears? The salmon's migration is a learned, imprinted behavior passed down genetically, but also reinforced by millions of carcasses, creating the conditions for success. If a run is extinguished for decades, can it ever truly be restored? Can the genetic memory outlast the ecological memory? We are left with a creature that defies our simplest notions of life and purpose. It is an ocean navigator using a magnetic map, a shapeshifter undergoing two horrific metamorphoses, a living battery that consumes itself, and finally, a nutrient angel, its death sowing the forests of tomorrow. Its life is a closed loop of astonishing complexity, connecting the depths of the Pacific to the heart of a mountain pine. But this loop is breaking, and in its breaking, we are witnessing more than the decline of a fish. We are watching a fundamental planetary rhythm skip a beat. The salmon's suicide run is a testament to life's most profound, paradoxical strategy, that sometimes the only way to truly endure is to design a beautiful, terrible, and perfect end. The question that remains, hanging in the waters of every dammed and warming river, is whether our world still has room for an ending this magnificent.
The silence of a salmonless stream is not an empty silence. It is a heavy, nutrient-poor silence. It is the sound of an ecological economy in collapse. To understand the true scale of the salmon's sacrifice, we must follow those marine nutrients one step further, into the very fabric of the land, and then into the chilling void their absence leaves behind. The transfer from salmon to tree is not a gentle suggestion, it's a fundamental driver of growth. In robust Alaskan and BC watersheds, researchers have calculated that salmon-derived nitrogen can account for up to 70% of the nitrogen in the foliage of trees near the stream. That's not just fertilization, that's identity. A bear eating a salmon and defecating in the woods is performing a more vital, targeted act of ecosystem engineering than any human forester. The salmon's body, through a chain of scavengers, predators, and decomposers, becomes the building block for cellulose, for lignin, for the towering cathedral of the coastal temperate rainforest. But this creates a haunting dependency. The trees, over millennia, have calibrated their growth to this annual pulse of marine wealth. Their rings tell a story of feast and famine directly correlated with salmon runs. A wide, dense ring speaks of a rich run years before, the nutrients taking time to weave into the wood. A series of thin, stressed rings often coincides with historic overfishing or a natural disaster that blocked a river. The forest remembers. It holds the chemical ghost of every salmon that ever spawned in its roots. Now consider a watershed where the runs have dwindled to a trickle or vanished entirely. The annual pulse is gone. The nutrient pump has ceased. The immediate effect is on the aquatic insects, whose populations shrink, leading to fewer and hungrier juvenile fish. But then the hunger moves uphill. The bears, finding less salmon, have fewer cubs. Their scat, once rich with marine nitrogen, now carries less fertilizing power. The trees at the streamside begin to grow more slowly. The understory changes. The plants that thrived on salmon-fed soils become stunted. The ecosystem doesn't just shrink, it simplifies. It becomes quieter, less productive, more fragile. This is the ghost forest in the making. Not dead trees,
but a living forest growing increasingly hungry, its growth stunted by a silent, spreading famine. The canopy thins, less shade falls on the stream. Without the cooling shade of robust trees, the water temperature rises, a death sentence for the cold-adapted salmon eggs and fry that might still be struggling to survive. It's a vicious, slow-motion feedback loop. Fewer salmon mean weaker forests, which mean hotter streams, which mean even fewer salmon. The loop that was once a virtuous life-giving cycle becomes a tightening spiral of collapse. And here we encounter a profound and unsettling evolutionary question. The salmon's migration is an instinct honed over millions of years, but how much of it is truly hardwired and how much depends on the living, breathing roadmap provided by previous generations? When adult salmon die and release their chemical signature into their home stream, they are not just fertilizing it, they are reinforcing its identity. They are saying, "This is the place." For the next generation of smolts preparing to leave, that chemical signature is a final, powerful imprint, confirming the memory they must carry to sea. What happens when that chemical signal fades? When a fry grows up in a stream that no longer smells strongly of its ancestors? Does the memory become fainter? Does the magnetic map in its head lose its specific destination? There is evidence that this olfactory blanking is a real threat. In degraded systems, smolts may imprint on weaker or distorted chemical cues. When they return as adults years later, navigating back to that faint, perhaps altered signature becomes a gamble. They might wander, entering wrong streams, wasting their final energy in search of a home that no longer broadcasts its address clearly. The breakdown is not just physical, it's informational. The ancient inherited map is being erased, not by a cataclysm, but by a gradual chemical silence. This leads us to the human hand in this unraveling, and it extends far beyond the obvious walls of dams. The ocean phase, the lost years, is now a gauntlet of our making. Commercial fishing fleets, even with modern management, are a massive targeted pressure. They intercept the salmon at sea, harvesting them before they can even begin their run. This doesn't just reduce numbers, it selectively removes the fish that might have the strongest homing instincts, the best navigational genes, potentially dulling the innate skill of the population over time. But a more insidious threat lurks in the open ocean pens of the aquaculture industry. Farmed salmon, often Atlantic species, are raised in dense nets in the very migration corridors of wild Pacific salmon. These farms are breeding grounds for parasites like sea lice, which can swarm and overwhelm vulnerable wild smolts leaving the rivers. They are reservoirs for diseases that can spill over into wild populations. And, perhaps most catastrophically, farmed salmon escape. Millions have broken free over the decades. These fugitives enter rivers, spawn with wild fish, and introduce domesticated, often weaker genetics into wild gene pools. They are a form of genetic pollution, diluting the finely tuned, hyperlocal recipes for survival that took millennia to evolve. A wild salmon's genome is a detailed, hyperlocal survival manual for its specific river. An escaped farm fish carries the generic, simplified manual of captivity. Their interbreeding writes gibberish over that ancient text. And then the great modulator of everything, the changing climate. The ocean is warming and acidifying. The prey base, the krill, the lanternfish, is shifting polarward or diving deeper, forcing salmon to expend more energy to find food during their critical ocean growth phase. The thermal curtain is rising. Salmon are cold water fish. There is a limit to how warm the ocean can get before their metabolism spins out of control, before they simply cannot store enough energy for the return journey. We are not just blocking their rivers, we are slowly turning their ocean nursery into a place that can no longer support their impossible journey. So the challenge is not singular, it is a concentric siege, from the blocked river to the polluted estuary, to the treacherous fished-out ocean, to the warming planet itself. The salmon is being pressed from every direction, at every stage of its epic, interconnected life cycle. The question is no longer just, can we save the salmon? The deeper, more frightening question is, have we already altered the world so fundamentally that the salmon's ancient, perfect strategy is no longer viable? Is the suicide run in the Anthropocene becoming simply suicide? Yet, in the face of this, there is a raw, desperate, and ingenious human response, a response that involves dynamite, DNA, and a radical rethinking of our place in this ancient cycle. Because if the salmon is a nutrient pump, then what happens when we try to become the mechanics, when we attempt to fix the broken parts of this biological machine with our own hands, our own technology, our own imperfect understanding? The solutions being deployed are as extreme as the problem, and they force us to confront the ultimate boundary between conservation and creation, between restoring a memory and inventing a new one.
The most visceral symbol of the broken cycle is also the most physical, the dam. For decades, these concrete monoliths were considered permanent features, the cost of progress. Now, in a staggering reversal of human ambition, we are tearing them down. The largest dam removal project in history is currently unfolding on the Klamath River in the American West. It is an act of breathtaking scale and humility, using dynamite and excavators not to conquer nature, but to surrender a past conquest. The goal is not to return to a pristine pre-human state. That is impossible. The goal is to restart the heartbeat of the river, to reconnect the mountains to the sea, to see if the salmon remember the way. The moment a dam is breached, a torrent of decades-old sediment is released. For a time, the river runs thick as gravy. It looks like death. But in that slurry are the very gravels that salmon need. The river, given back its rhythm, begins to sort and scatter those sediments, rebuilding the lost spawning grounds inch by inch. It is a messy, chaotic, and hopeful rebirth. But will the salmon come? The answer lies not just in the cleared path, but in the silent chemical memory of the fish themselves. It is a grand, real-time experiment in ecological recall. Where the path cannot be cleared, we build elaborate, absurd-looking substitutes, fish ladders and lifts. These are stressful, energy-sapping obstacle courses that force a weakened fish to perform a series of exhausting leaps and navigational choices. They are a testament to human ingenuity, but also to our folly, a desperate attempt to mitigate a problem we created, a Rube Goldberg machine standing in for a free-flowing river. Their success is mixed, a numbers game where every fish that makes it is a victory, and every one that fails is a quiet indictment. But the intervention goes deeper than infrastructure. It now reaches into the very germplasm of the species. In hatcheries, technicians perform cryopreservation, flash freezing salmon milt in liquid nitrogen, banking the genetic diversity of vulnerable runs in sterile vats. It is a modern-day ARC, a backup drive for a biological software that might otherwise be erased. Meanwhile, other scientists are engaged in what's called assisted evolution. They are studying the genetic markers of resilience, which genes help a salmon tolerate warmer water, which ones bolster disease resistance. The controversial idea is to selectively breed for these traits, accelerating evolution to outpace climate change. But this walks a razor's edge. Are we saving the salmon, or are we engineering a new domesticated creature that merely wears the salmon's name? Are we preserving a memory,
or writing a new one over the fading original. The most poignant efforts, however, are not technological, but cultural and legal. For indigenous nations of the Pacific Northwest, the Coast Salish, the Yurok, the Tlingit, the salmon is not a resource, it is a relative. Its return is a covenant, the foundation of culture, ceremony, and life. Their fight is not just for conservation, but for the recognition of personhood for the salmon and the legal rights of the rivers themselves. They are using Western law to defend an indigenous worldview, arguing that the ecosystem has an inherent right to exist, flourish, and regenerate. This is a fight to change not just policy, but the very story we tell about our relationship to the natural world. It frames the salmon's run not as an ecosystem service for us to manage, but as a sacred reciprocal relationship we are obligated to uphold. And so we stand at a strange precipice. We are using dynamite and DNA sequencers, law books, and larval counts, all in service of a single, aching question. Can a memory survive not just in genes, but in the changed fabric of a world? The salmon that might someday recolonize a freed river will carry the ancient magnetic map, but will the river, after decades of silence, still smell like home? Will the forest, starved for decades, be robust enough to provide the cool, shaded nursery? The salmon might remember, but will the landscape remember the salmon? The suicide run has always been a closed loop, from stream to ocean and back again, life flowing into death, flowing into life. Our modern world has cut that loop open, spilling its meaning into the void. The heroic journey has become a ghost story. Our task now is the most profound and unsettling kind of repair. It is not about building a cage to protect a dying thing. It is about healing the context in which that thing makes sense. It is about repairing the river, the forest, the ocean, and our own place within them, so that the salmon's magnificent, terrible, perfect end can once again be not a tragic finale, but a generative beginning. The salmon's run is a testament to life's stubborn, beautiful insistence on cycling, on transforming, on using death to fuel life. In breaking that cycle, we have impoverished our world in ways we are only beginning to measure, in thinner trees, quieter forests, and a simplified, hungry landscape. But in the desperate, imperfect, and awe-inspiring attempts to mend it, in the roaring collapse of a concrete dam, in the careful thawing of frozen sperm, in the steadfast ceremonies by a river's edge, we see a reflection of that same stubborn, beautiful insistence. We are, in our own flawed way, trying to learn the salmon's deepest lesson, that sometimes, to ensure a future, you must be willing to make a sacrifice. For the salmon, the sacrifice is its body. For us, the sacrifice must be our old ways of being. The question hanging in the cleared waters of the Klamath, in the banks of genetic material, in the warming currents of the Pacific, is whether we are capable of an ending and a beginning that magnificent.